Today, Yael has actually been with us for a week. She was at the Pingala Interactions in Computing in Mysore over the last weekend, and then she went to IIT Madras. Then she came to Microsoft Research in Bangalore, as well as at IISc. We thank her for being so generous with her time, and we have thoroughly enjoyed having her here. So without further ado, on behalf of ACM India, I very warmly welcome Professor Yael Kalai and request her to deliver the lecture.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yes, good. Okay. So thank you so much for inviting me, for the amazing hospitality that I've been receiving in India in the last kind of more than a week now. I have to tell you, I've had the time of my life. I love this place. I love the culture. I love the food. I'm really enjoying myself. So with that, I'll give the last talk of my trip, and after that, I'm heading back home to my children. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, what I'm going to tell you today about is how to verify computations that are done on untrusted platforms. So the way we do computations have changed dramatically in the last, I don't know, 20 years in a very, very fast rate. So we used to do computations on our own devices. For those who remember, may look like this. And the important point is all our computations were done locally on our own trusted devices. This has changed. Okay, so today, computations, no? Okay, computations are done often on untrusted platforms. Often a lot of our computations are done on some cloud platforms, and this is really due to the amount of huge kind of computational burden that are put forth by today's reality. So this is due to these public ledgers, for example. Now we have blockchain technologies where even verifying the correctness of a single transaction is a huge computational burden. Of course, this is becoming even more so with all these deep learning, the large language models, and very heavy machine learning algorithms that are here today. And so kind of verifying these computations that are done on kind of other platforms is really, really crucial. So here's the problem this new reality brings with it a lot of challenges. For example, the first challenge that we're concerned with is economical challenge. For example, how do we price these computational burdens? I'm not an economist. I am a cryptographer, though, so I'm really interested in privacy. If our data is put elsewhere, what about the privacy of our data? Machine learning models are trained on our data, and we may be concerned about privacy. So actually, I'm very interested in this regime, and I've been working on it quite a lot, but this is not the topic of this talk. Actually, what I want to talk about today, and the challenge, is that of integrity. Namely, when we outsource our computation, how do we know that the output we get is true, is the correct output? Okay, so when you ask a large language model a question, it gives you an answer. How do you know it's the correct answer? Okay, so let me give you kind of a specific kind of example of something I've been working on a lot, and that is the efficient verification of some program. So here's the question at hand. Say you have a program M. Okay, M is for Turing machine, but it's some program, a C++ program, Python, whatever you like. Think of it like as a short description of a program, and you have an input X, and you want to run this program on this input. But this program runs in a lot of time or requires a lot of space, and you don't have the resources to run this program. So you outsource, you give this program, you give the input to some platform, an untrusted platform, and tell the platform, you do the computation for me. And the platform does the computation and produces a Y, an output Y. How do you know that that's the correct output? So really what you want the platform to do is also give you a little proof that proves that indeed it ran the program M on input X, and Y is the output. So a little more formally, what we want from this, well, this clicker, maybe I can use this. Oh, it comes, just delay. Okay. Okay, so the first requirement we want is what we call completeness, which essentially means if the platform, or what we call the prover, does everything correctly, it should be able to produce such a succinct proof without too much overhead. Okay, so a bit more formally, what we say is, if indeed Y is the outcome, and let's say it takes time T to produce it, then one can generate a valid kind of succinct certificate or proof of Y in time not much more than T, so there shouldn't be too much more overhead. And this is very important, the size and the time it takes to verify their certificate should be much, much smaller than T, since otherwise, what's the point? You'll do it on your own device. Okay, so the crucial point is verification. It should be very, very efficient. And of course, you want the prover not to have too much overhead, otherwise you won't be able to use this thing. Okay, so this is what we call completeness. How about soundness? So soundness just says that, intuitively what soundness says is that if, wow. Yeah, I know. Oh, I need to point here. Okay, got it. Okay, soundness should say that if Y is not the correct output, you should not be able to generate a certificate. Okay? Easy. That's the goal. Clear? Okay, let me tell you, impossible. You cannot achieve this goal. Okay, so why am I sitting here, in this honor and telling you about a task that you cannot achieve? So the reason is, if I had to define what cryptography is in one sentence, I would say that cryptography is the art of overcoming negative results. So when you work in cryptography, no matter what you try to do, you hit a wall. That's not possible. And kind of what cryptography really is about is kind of cleverly overcoming these barriers. So, and this is just one example of such a area where we hit a wall. And how do we overcome this wall? We relax the soundness guarantee that we ask for. In other words, instead of saying, look, it's impossible to generate valid certificates, namely, valid certificates just do not exist for wrong answers. Instead, what we say, that it should be practically impossible. What do I mean by practically impossible? What I mean is, maybe one can do it, but if an adversary manages to generate a fake certificate of a false answer, it means that adversary can break my cryptographic assumption. Now note, this task seems like it has nothing to do with cryptography. It's not about hiding. Usually when people talk about cryptography, they think about hiding data, hiding a secret message. I'm not hiding anything here. I just want correctness. That's all I want. Where did I sneak cryptography into this game? Okay, so again, what I'm saying is, look, you may be able to cheat. I'm not saying cheating is completely impossible, but the only way you can cheat is by breaking some cryptographic assumption. Okay? Now, where does this cryptographic assumption comes into play? So first of all, this soundness guarantee is what we call computational soundness, because it really only talks about soundness against computationally bounded adversaries. Because if an adversary is all-powerful, he can always break our cryptographic assumptions. An example of a cryptographic assumption, for example, is that it's hard to factor large numbers. If you're all-powerful in exponential time, you can always break these assumptions. Okay? And the idea is, well, if you run in reasonable amount of time, let's say, time bounded by the next 50 years or whatever it is, you should not be able to break our assumption. So where is this cryptographic assumption? Where do we hide it? So we assume that the prover and the verifier have access to what we call a common reference string, like some short string. You can think of it, sometimes it's just a random string. Okay, and this, we call it CRS for short. The CRS string is needed both to compute the certificate and to verify the certificate. So as you'll see, just jumping ahead, in our actual protocol that I'm going to show you, this CRS is just a description of a hash function. Okay, because you may be confused now. Wait, where does the CRS come from? Who decides on it? What is it? So as an example, and that's what we'll see today, in the example of this scheme, it's just some off-the-shelf hash function. Okay? So this is the goal. Any questions? Okay. So this goal is what's called a succinct, because we want the certificate to be succinct, non-interactive, because it's not an interactive thing, it's just a certificate, argument. Argument is just a word a word for computationally sound proof. So we don't want to call the certificate a proof, because if you're all powerful, you can fake it. That's not what a proof is. So instead, we call it an argument. And for short, we call it snarg. I don't know if any of you heard this buzzword snarg, but now you know what it means. So this is the goal of what I'm going to tell you about today. And here's the theorem. The theorem says that we can indeed construct such a snarg for any computation. So you give me your program M, you give me an input X, I can give you a Y along with a succinct snarg, okay, or a succinct certificate that proves to you, and when you see that, you know, okay, Y must be correct, or maybe I'm a supercomputer and broke the cryptographic assumption. Okay, so, and we know how to do this based on some standard cryptographic assumptions, which I just put it in gray, but I don't want to get into. But we can, for example, do it under post-quantum secure assumption. That's kind of what as a community, we're focused on these days. Okay, so in the rest of the talk, what I want to focus on, is the journey. So this is something I've been working on for many, many years, actually starting from the end of my PhD at MIT, on and off in various works, of course. And what I want to, before I go into this journey that I found was a really, really fun journey, I just want to mention that I think the reason this journey was so amazing is due to my really fantastic collaborators. I was extremely lucky throughout my career so far to work with amazing, amazing people, my students, my postdoc, my colleagues, mentors. So all the works I'm going to talk about today are joint with various co-authors. And really, I think that's, as much as I enjoy science, and I really, really do, I think like working with these people is the biggest joy of all. And in general, these collaborations are really makes this journey kind of really, really special. Okay, so actually the construction of snargs, or the main kind of foundations, started in the mid-'80s with the introduction of what's called zero-knowledge proofs. Now, zero-knowledge proofs is very different from what we want. Okay, it's something completely different. So what is a zero-knowledge proof? A zero-knowledge proof, the idea, is actually about hiding. This is a cryptographic idea, okay? So the idea there, you want to say, you want to give a proof that reveals no information beyond the fact that the statement you're proving is correct. That's what a zero-knowledge proof is, okay? So in the mid-'80s, this notion was defined, a proof that reveals no information. That was the goal. And now they constructed it. They constructed a zero-knowledge proof. How do you construct a zero-knowledge proof? So actually, once they defined this notion, or in the process of defining this notion, the first thing that they realized, this is Goldwasser, Mikhaili, and Rakov. Goldwasser and Mikhaili are both Turing Award laureates. I should say, Shafi Goldwasser, my advisor, who won the Turing Award, won it after I was her student. Just saying. Okay, so after they defined this really, really beautiful notion, what they noticed is that actually it's impossible to construct zero-knowledge proofs. Okay, so again, beautiful idea, boom, a wall. Okay, so what do? Again, as I said, you have to overcome it. That's the creative part in cryptography. How do you overcome these negative results? And let me tell you why, intuitively, why is it impossible? What is a proof? Okay, a proof is like a bunch of, something, a piece of paper, many pieces of paper, maybe 100 pieces of paper, that you verify kind of line by line. It's a bunch of logical deductions. That's what a proof is. So a proof, in some sense, always contains information. For example, you can sell a proof, so it's worth something. Okay, something that you can sell for money, it has some information in it. So that's at an intuitive level. But actually, you can formalize it and argue that any proof, like what we call a classical proof, cannot be a zero-knowledge proof. Okay, this is, again, high level without giving any definitions. But actually, this talk is not about zero knowledge. I want to talk about snarks. And the reason I'm mentioning this result is because in order to overcome the negative result, what they did is they defined a new way to come up with proofs. They defined the model of interactive proofs. Now, this model was defined for constructing zero-knowledge proofs. And indeed, they were able to convert any proof into a zero-knowledge proof using this model. However, what's really interesting, this model is interesting way beyond zero-knowledge, and it's kind of the foundation of constructing snarks as well. Okay, and it's really been instrumental in all of kind of proof theories, PCPs, and a bunch of kind of laid a lot of foundations in complexity theory as well. Okay, so what is an interactive proof? An interactive proof is an interactive process between a prover, which I know by P, and a verifier V. And this proof is kind of an interactive process where, the prover sends a message, the verifier may ask a question, prover sends a message, verifier asks a question, so on and so forth. So it's per verifier. Yeah, it's a conversation with a specific verifier. Moreover, and importantly, the verifier is randomized. The verifier actually tosses coins. And this is critical because if the verifier was deterministic, so no, the verifier is weaker than the prover. The prover is the strong man who's kind of doing the work. If the verifier did not toss coin, then the prover could compute the verifier's next messages. So nothing about it is really interactive. So really the kind of the power of this proof system comes from the fact that the verifier tosses coins, the verifier's messages are randomized, and the prover can't predict them ahead of time. And the soundness guarantee is probabilistic. Namely, the guarantee is that a cheating prover cannot convince the verifier to accept a false statement except with some small probability. Now, first when you look at it, you may be like, okay, this is a problem because I don't want to accept a small probability of error. What is a proof? What if the small probability happens? So now I get a proof of a false statement? So don't worry, this is actually not a concern. And the reason is, even let's say if the probability of error is half, which is very large, if you repeat it k times and accept if and only if all of them are accepting, then you can reduce the error probability to 2 to the minus k, okay, which is tiny. So I don't repeat it 500 times. The probability that you accept a false statement is 2 to the minus 500. It's smaller than the 1 over the number of molecules in the universe. Okay, so it's practically 0. Okay, so the probability of error for practical purposes is 0. Okay, so why am I telling you about these interactive proofs? And what is the relevance of interactive proofs? So beyond the fact that they played a very important role for constructing zero-knowledge proofs, for which Shafi and Sylvia won a Turing Award, they also they were noted shortly after they were introduced. It was noticed that these proof systems are very, very powerful. Okay, so what do I mean by powerful? So here's an example. Consider a chess configuration, a chessboard with some configuration. Let's say I want to prove to you that the black player has a winning strategy. I don't know if it does, but let's say I want to prove to you that it has a winning strategy. How do I do that using a classical proof? I don't know how to do it efficiently at all. The only way I can think of giving you a classical proof is to say, well, no matter what the white player does, here's a move of the black player, such that no matter what move the white player does, here's a move to the black player, and so on, and then see the black player wins no matter what. But this is going to be a huge, exponential sized tree. So the proof is exponential size, it's gigantic. it turns out that with an interactive proof, we can do this very, very succinctly. Okay? Now, why, intuitively, why is interaction helpful here? Why is it easier to use interaction? So here is a very, very high-level intuitive reason why. Let's say I want to now tell you, look, I have a winning strategy. Give me your biggest grandmaster. Give me the best player on earth. I'll play them and I'll win. So let's play interactively. Me, you. See, I won. Now, okay, that doesn't mean really that the black player has a winning strategy. That means that the black player can win that specific grandmaster. But that's kind of the intuition, okay? Actually, to make this precise, the interactive proof is much, much more complicated than what I just said. And somehow we run kind of over all the possible grandmaster at once in some very, very high-level intuitive way. And as a result, the prover becomes, in order to prove, the verifier is very succinct. The communication is small, the verifier is very efficient. But the runtime of the prover that needs to convince the verifier is gigantic. Okay, it's actually in the original work, it's like even more than exponential. It's like 2 to the, anyway, huge. Okay, so there's a huge blow up in the prover runtime. Okay, so whereas the example I said, let me play against the grandmaster, that's no overhead. Really, I'll just play. But actually to do this, to convince you that I can win all the grandmaster or all the possible players, then essentially the computational burden on the prover becomes huge. So while this is a beautiful model and a very, very strong result, this result, by the way, can be made much more general. We know kind of there's a characterization that all interactive, you can prove any computation in what's called p-space that takes polynomial space, you can prove in an interactive proof. This is just a statement, a result in complexity theory. So while this result is very powerful, it's only of theoretical interest because there's no way you can implement this prover. Okay, so in 2008, this was towards my end of my PhD with Shafi, my advisor, and a fellow student and a very close friend, Guy Rothblum. We wanted to construct an interactive proof where there's not too much overhead on the prover side. Yeah, the verifier is very, very efficient. That's a requirement. But we don't want the prover to run in exponential time. So instead we say, you know what? If the computation takes time t, the prover should not run in time much, much more than t. Okay, what do I mean? Well, if you're a theoretician, polynomial in t is good. If you're a practitioner, you want linear in t. You care about the constant as well. But that's kind of the idea. Okay, you want to minimize the overhead. And at the same time, you want the verifier to be very, very efficient. Okay, so here's the theorem that we proved. So we call such a interactive proof a doubly efficient interactive proof, since it's not only the verifier that's efficient, also the prover. Okay, of course, the level of efficiency you want from the prover and the level of efficiency you want for the verifier is not the same. The verifier should be much, much more efficient, but also the prover should be relatively efficient, should not run time much more than t. And what we proved is that there exists a doubly efficient interactive proof for all bounded depth computations. Now, where the communication grows linearly with the depth. Okay, so let me parse this. So we construct this doubly efficient interactive proofs for bounded depth computations. Let me say what bounded depth computations are. So let me think about a computation as a circuit. Okay, so we have our input, x1 up to xn. That's our input. And we have you think of the computations just a bunch of kind of a circuit that has any, I don't know, it can be and, or, and not gates, or addition, multiplication, mod 2, whatever your, any kind of complete set of gates that you want to consider. So you have this circuit. Think of it as layered circuit. The depth is the number of layers in the circuit. Now, we show a doubly efficient interactive proof for any such circuit, but the runtime of the verifier and the number of rounds that require grow with the depth. They grow linearly with the depth. So if the circuit is very, very deep, it's not very interesting because the verifier will run in a long time. So really, this result is really interesting where the depth is small. For example, you can think of polylog depth. And then, the verifier is super efficient. That's as an example. But even linear and depth and time much more. Can be n to the 10th, can be even n to the log n. Or, as long as the time is much larger than the depth, this result is significant. Okay, so how do we, so by the way, this is interactive, and it's only for bounded depth. I promised no interaction in any computation. So I'm far from delivering what I promised. But this is an important intermediate step towards getting our snark. Okay, so let me say a few words about how you come up with this doubly efficient interactive proof. And actually, the high-level idea is very, very simple. So let me tell you the high-level idea. Suppose you're the prover. You're trying to prove to me that this circuit, that the output is 1. Now, I want to catch you if you're cheating. That's my goal. The goal of the verifier is to catch the prover if he's cheating. So how do I catch you? I'm going to tell you, you know what? Give me the value of the 2 children. I'm going to check that the gate is satisfied. If the gate is not satisfied, I immediately reject you. So you better give me something that satisfies the gate. Now, if you cheated me, if 1 was incorrect, is not the value of that gate, of the output gate, then one of the children must be incorrect. So what am I going to do? I'm going to guess and hope for the best. So I'm saying, well, if you're cheating, one of them is incorrect, maybe the left one is incorrect. Okay, then I tell you, you know what? Go to the left child, give me the 2 children. If the left child was incorrect, not the correct value, then one of the 2 children is not the correct value, unless the gate is not satisfied, in which case I immediately reject you. Okay, if one of them is not correct, I'm going to randomly guess which one. Maybe the right. And this is how I continue. I ask you for the 2 children. I choose one of them. I go down until I reach a leaf. A leaf is an input value. It's one of the input indices. Let's say I know x3. I know x. I, the verifier, know x. So I check. Is it correct? If yes, I accept you. Otherwise, I reject. That's a very basic and intuitive, simple protocol. The only problem with this protocol is that it's pathetic. Why is it pathetic? Because every time, let's say you cheated, every time with probability half, I choose the wrong place. So in order to catch you at the end, I need to every time guess where your cheat was. So I'll catch you only with probability 1/2 to the depth. So I'll catch you, you can cheat with probability 1 minus 1/2 to the depth, almost with probability 1. So this is not a good protocol. However, this idea was actually this basic idea is very instrumental. Why? The reason it's not a good protocol is because every time you go from a layer to the layer below, you lose a probability half of catching the prover. Half is too big. I don't want to lose. I want to say, if you cheated here, you must cheat here. Or with very, very high probability you cheat here. That's really what I want. And the way we get that is by essentially the high-level idea is we encode. We tell the prover, encode each layer using an error-correcting code. What does an error-correcting code do for you? What error-correcting code does for you is, assuming you encode it correctly, what it does is it ensures if somewhere in the layer you gave the wrong answer, almost everywhere in the encoding there will be a wrong answer. So if you're wrong in the layer above, with almost certainty, I'll go to a place where you're wrong in the encoding of the layer below. So again, to enhance this probability, to get probability close to 1 that I continue to catch you, I move to the encoding. Okay, and again, the idea behind this error correcting code is if a single gate in a layer is incorrect, and the encoding, almost everything will be incorrect. Of course, this still is a big problem because now how do you do the reduction and the encoding? When we did it on the gates, it's simple. You just check the gate. How do you, and then encoding, it's like, wait, it's not even clear how you do it. Things seem actually much more complicated. Sorry, the slides moved, the things moved a little bit from my laptop to here, so things are a bit off. But essentially what we do, we have a much more elaborate kind of reduction protocol where we go from one layer to the other layer on the encoding. So we prove, we go kind of from a value on the encoding of a layer to a value of the encoding of the layer below. And we argue that kind of, if you are incorrect, you will continue to be incorrect with very high probability until you reach the bottom. Okay, and what this, and the bottom, of course, you can verify on your own. And what this reduction protocol is, that's actually quite complicated, and that's where the beautiful math comes in. That involves kind of polynomials and finite fields and beautiful algebra. But that I won't have time to talk about today. Okay, so where are we? What did I kind of, in a very, very high level, what did I show you so far? I showed you an interactive proof. I promised non-interactive, but I delivered interactive. Only for bounded depth computations, where I promised all computations. And, by the way, with no cryptography. In the beginning, I told you there's cryptography, no cryptography. This is a real interactive, has what we call statistical soundness. Namely, even if the prover is all powerful, it cannot cheat, except with very, very small probability. That, again, we can push down to 0, or almost to 0. So I need to remove the red components to make it non-interactive in all computations. Okay, so this protocol is referred to as the GKR protocol in the literature, and I'll refer to that as such in the talk today. Okay, so unfortunately, during this talk, I'm not going to tell you too much about how to get around the bounded depth part. That just requires kind of heavy cryptography. But essentially, what the very, very high level intuition, what we do, if your circuit is very deep, there is a way kind of to squash it using cryptography. So there comes a lot of kind of commitments and like digital commitments, and some kind of fancy cryptography comes into play when you want to squash the circuit to make it bounded depth. So the idea is you start with a circuit. If it's small depth, I'm happy. If it's high depth, I squash it, and then run GKR on the squash circuit. Now, how I squash it, and actually it's quite technical. So let me skip that part, and let me actually take care of the interactive part. So let me show how I get rid of interaction. And the reason I want to focus on that is because I think the techniques there are much, much more interesting. Okay, so in order to reduce interaction, I'm using a property of the GKR protocol that actually a lot of our protocols in cryptography have this property. And this property is called public coin. Public coin means that the verifier in this protocol simply sends random bits. So the messages from the verifier are not complicated messages. It's just randomness. So if you remember the simple the toy GKR protocol I showed you, without the error correcting code, what does the verifier send? Every time with probability half left, with probability half right. Just a random bit. That's public coin. Okay, where the verifier just sends a random bit or random set of bits each time. This is a public coin protocol. And the GKR protocol, even on the encoding, remains a public coin protocol. Okay, why am I focusing on this public coin issue, on this specific property? Because we have actually a beautiful heuristic called the Fiat-Shamir heuristic for eliminating interaction from any public coin protocol. Okay, so you give me any public coin protocol, I can get rid of interaction from it. So let me actually tell you how this is done, because it's so beautiful, it's simple, and it's widely used everywhere. Okay, it's one of the most heavily used paradigms in cryptography. So let me demonstrate it for 3 messages. So suppose you have an interactive proof that consists of 3 messages. Prover sends alpha, verifier sends beta, prover sends gamma. How do you eliminate interaction? The idea is you tell the prover and verifier, agree on some hash function. Now, what is a hash function? Think of it like the idea behind the hash function is like a function that behaves randomly. Okay, that's the property we want a hash function. That's a good hash function. A good hash function is one that really behaves like a random function. Now we have a lot of on-the-shelf hash functions that are used. People use them all the time. Okay, so agree on one of these hash functions. For example, I know SHA-256. That's one of them. And now we tell the prover, you compute the beta of the verifier. So there's no verifier anymore. The beta of the verifier is going to be now simply a hash of the transcript so far. So essentially, instead of the verifier choosing beta, we'll let the hash function choose beta. Or in other words, instead of having the prover interact with the verifier, he'll interact with the hash function. Now, if the hash function is really, really random, what does it matter if you interact with the verifier or the prover? Both of them send you random bits. So interact with the hash function. That's the intuition behind why the Fiat-Shamir paradigm should work. Say, look, if the hash function is really, really good, if it's really like random, then what does it matter if the verifier chooses it or the verifier chooses beta or the hash function chooses beta? That's it. So this is the paradigm. Okay, we eliminate the verifier. Verifier does not exist at all anymore, and it's the messages of the verifier are now replaced with the hash H of the transcript so far. That's it. Okay, and that's how we construct our snark. So what is, remember, our snark, a succinct, non-interactive argument? You just take the GKR protocol that's very interactive and apply the Fiat-Shamir heuristic to it. And that's where the CRS, remember in the beginning I told you CRS, think of it as a hash function? That's exactly the hash function. Okay, so the prover and verifier agree on a hash function, and now the prover on its own comes up with the entire GKR protocol. Every time he expects to get a message from the verifier, he essentially applies the hash to the transcript so far, and that defines the message. So that's it. That's how we get the snark. Okay? Great. So that begs the following question. Is this paradigm secure? Is this heuristic secure? Now let me tell you, you better hope that it's secure, because we're all using it all the time. Okay, any of you who has an iPhone, every time you're using your iPhone, the Fiat-Shamir paradigm is in there, because all the Apple devices, in their signature scheme relies on this Fiat-Shamir heuristic. So we better hope that this heuristic is sound. Now, let me tell you, in practice, it is sound. So don't worry, it was never broken in practice. Okay, well, so I'm a theoretician, okay? So if it's used all over the place, people believe it's sound, there must be a proof, so we should be able to prove that it's sound under some, property of the hash function. So can we come up with a proof? I mean, it's probably not independent of the axioms, so we should be able to come up with a proof. So when I started thinking about this, I was actually, before I came to work with Shafi at MIT, I was a student in Weizmann Institute, and I was advised by Adi Shamir, who also won a Turing Award, after I was a student. So So I really wanted to prove this paradigm. I really, really wanted to impress him. But all of us had or have advisors, and you know how you really, really want to impress them? So I really wanted to impress Adi Shamir and to prove the security of this paradigm. And I spent a very long time trying to prove that it's secure. So much so that at some point I came home to my parents' house. My dad is an academic, he's a game theorist. And I remember I told him, I'm so frustrated, I'm spending all this time and I'm getting nowhere. And I remember he was telling me, well, maybe it's time to look for a counterexample. And I was so annoyed, I'm working so hard. But I did. And we actually came up with a counterexample, showing that actually here's an example of a protocol, a public coin protocol, contrived, I should say, contrived. We concoct this protocol. But we proved no matter which hash function you use for the fiat Shamir, the protocol becomes insecure. So, okay, So should you guys worry and stop using iPhones? No, this is a contrived example. And still, in practice, things work. So what this counterexample taught me, at least, is that if you want a proof of the fiat Shamir paradigm, you can't hope for a general proof that will work for all protocols, because such does not exist, because we do have a contrived counterexample. And let me tell you even more than that. Not too long ago, it was shown, actually, there's a first snark heuristic construction from the 90s, okay, that didn't have like a proof of security of soundness under standard assumption. And recently, it uses the fiat Shamir paradigm. And it was broken. So the fiat Shamir paradigm kind of doesn't work for that. So why should it work for GKR? And the reason there was still hope, even though that was a bit scary, this result. The reason that there's still hope is because all the counterexamples, both our counterexample and the counterexample from 2019, were when the initial protocol, the interactive protocol, was only computationally sound. So the initial protocol had cryptography in it already. Now, GKR has statistical soundness. It's secure against any unbounded cheating prover. So then, of course, you ask, well, is the fiat Shamir secure when applied to statistically sound interactive protocols? Public coin, of course. Is it secure then? So a lot of sweat went into this question. Okay, we worked a lot, many, many years on this question. And here's what we know. Actually, we believe the answer is yes, it is secure for any statistically sound interactive protocol. But we managed to prove it under very, very strong cryptographic assumptions. Ones that I'm not sure if I had to bet if they're true, the assumption is true or not sure where I would go. So I don't believe the assumption really. But we showed that actually for a large class of interactive protocols, statistically sound protocols that include the GKR, but include many others, actually you can prove that it's sound under standard cryptographic assumptions. So one example is the learning with error, LWE. I focused on that because it's post-quantum secure. That's kind of an assumption we like, but we know also under other standard cryptographic assumptions. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about snarks. And then 5 minutes, it's 3:30. Okay, I'll just say a couple more words until Jen tells me kind of a hint. Okay, so let me just tell you kind of where we went with this, or where the community took it, not me, but the community. So, I'm a theoretician, as I said, I work in theory. This kind of line of work has been a really, really fun work as a large community, theoreticians and practitioners. So there's a lot of prototyping of these SNARG works. Some are GKR-based, the yellow are GKR-based, but there's a lot that use completely different techniques that have been implemented as well. This has been deployed by various Currently, it's mainly being deployed by blockchain companies, but I feel like probably this will change. So this is kind of new. The most recent or the most kind of well-known blockchain company that uses these snags are Ethereum. But there's many, many others as well. I didn't really do a deep search. So I think in general, this kind of this area was a big success story for us theoretical cryptographers. Now we're in the process of standardizing these things, and hopefully it'll be easier to adopt in the future. So I guess one thing I wanted to say is during this journey, when we worked about snarks, we found actually really, really interesting connections to completely unrelated areas in theoretical computer science. So just as an example, we use the GKR snark result to prove that it's hard to compute in Nash equilibrium. Like, how did that come about? Turns out the Nash equilibrium is complete is complete for a certain class that contains a problem which is called verifiable end of the line. And inside the verifiable, we put a snark, the GKR, blah, blah. Turns out we can use GKR to prove hardness. We found connections with complexity, with quantum complexity, which are really, really interesting. In particular, we found a really interesting connection between the concept of encryption and non-signaling, which is a concept that is in quantum mechanics. So completely different. Turns out these things are very, very similar. And again, this was kind of used this was not in GKR, but in another kind of work. So we found really, really interesting connection to other areas of theory and to cryptography as well. For example, the Fiat-Shamir paradigm, which was actually not introduced for proof systems. The Fiat-Shamir paradigm was introduced to construct digital signature schemes. Okay, so this is a very important kind of paradigm for signature schemes. So kind of, we learned a lot in the process. Okay, so do I have a couple minutes for, oh, okay, I have. Okay, so let me just mention a few kind of problems we're working on now, and kind of the thing that I think are the most interesting open problems that I invite all of you to join me. It will really help me because, there's some problems that I think I won't sleep well at night until someone solves them. So please help me out here. Okay, so the first one, which I feel like we're very close, we made a lot of progress, is the following. So far, I talked about proving correctness of a computation. But now, and succinctly, now here's another question. Suppose, forget about computation. So computation is a deterministic thing. You have a program, you have an input. Let me change it. Suppose you have a proof, like an NP witness, or a proof for some theorem, but it's very, very long. Can you use cryptography to shrink it, to make it short? So for example, we all write papers. Some of our papers have very, very long and painful proofs to read. Can we use cryptography to just shrink it so that the committee, the people who need to assess these contributions can at least check for validity if the proofs are correct? Instead of, reading this entire, paper? Okay, so that's a question. We have heuristics that take long proofs and use cryptography to shrink them, but nothing under standard assumptions. So can we do it under, for example, the LWE, learning with air, which is our kind of flag, and our favorite cryptographic assumption? So currently we don't know. We made a lot of progress. We know of large kind of class of proofs that we can shrink, but not all. So this is one thing that keeps me up at night. The other two, one of them has to do with quantum, and the other one has to do with LLMs. So quantum, cryptographers are very worried about quantum computation, about quantum computers coming along. However, quantum computers can also be very beneficial to us because they're very powerful. We can use them. So now, suppose we have a quantum computer. We want to use this quantum computer. We want the quantum computer to do computations for us. How do we know that it's doing what it's supposed to? Let's say it's not our computer. We don't trust it. Someone else, there's one big quantum computer owned by, I don't know, Microsoft, Google, whatever. And that one, we can pay money, have that quantum computer do computations for us. How do we classical computers verify the correctness? Or can we verify the correctness of quantum computations classically? So this was actually done by a beautiful, fantastic breakthrough by Urmila Mahadev, who was a student at the time. But of course, there's a lot of ways we want to improve our protocol. First, it was still very, very long. We want to make it succinct. It's not succinct. Second, it had many rounds. We want to make it non-interactive. So there's still a lot of work there. And finally, the last thing is verifying indeed machine learning algorithms. And what the difference between verifying machine learning algorithms or LLMs and what I talked about is that typically in machine learning algorithms, okay, it's done. But in machine learning algorithms, the problem is we don't know what the data is. Okay, so when in the LLM, we don't know the training data. So how do we verify something when we don't know the data? So this also requires kind of coming up with the correct question. Okay, so of course you can't do it. So maybe what if you have you can access the distribution from which the data should have come from? Then can you verify? Can the LLM prove to you that the output is correct? So there's various kind of questions along these lines. I think kind of the robustness of LLMs is a huge issue for society that we need to deal with. I think cryptographers are equipped to deal with that, and I think that's one of the questions that we as a community should solve. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. It was a very nice talk. I have one question regarding this Fiat semi-transformation. So you mentioned to explain the Fiat semi-transformation that alpha, beta, gamma, right? And the verifier sends that message beta. And now hash function or a random, it's a randomly generated. And the prover is generating it locally, right?
The prover is computing it.
Yeah, by hash of that alpha prior message.
Yes.
So if it is a not of a challenge, which is not going to give a correct proof for the prover, it is not beneficial for it, why not it replaces with a different alpha and generates H of alpha prime?
Great question. Okay, let me make, this is a very, very good question. So I guess the question was following, wait, the fiat transmutation transfer paradigm can't work because here's an attack I can do as a prover, okay? And which I can never do with an actual verifier. I'll try alpha, I'll get a beta. Maybe I'm lucky and beta is the question I can answer. In which case I'll proceed. If I can't answer that question, I'll try again. I'll rewind, go find another alpha prime. And then go to the hash function. Hopefully now I can generate. I'll do it until I find a good beta, and then I'm done. So I should be able to cheat. So let me tell you, you're right. If you are all powerful, then you can cheat. However, in our protocols, beta is like, think of beta as like minimum, I don't know, 256 bits. It's big. It's K, like some security parameter, K. And if the statement is false, there's only very few betas for which you know the answer. It's a negligible fraction. So the probability that you'll get a good beta, that you know how to answer, good for the prover, bad for the verifier. But if the prover is lucky and gets a beta that it can answer, is negligible. And therefore, yes, indeed, that's why, yes, you can break it, but it will take you a very, very long time. A great, great question.
Thank you.
So the question was, I started with like perfect completeness, perfect soundness for the definition of verification. I argued you can't have both, so I said, let's make the soundness computational. The question was, why the soundness? Maybe keep the soundness perfect or statistical, make the completeness. So, okay, I can lower the standard, so I can make the completeness not perfect, and sometimes in some schemes, they do that. But even if you have imperfect completeness, you hit the same wall. So you really, okay, here's the negative result. If you want statistical soundness, even if you relax completeness to half, or relax completeness in any way that makes sense, you'll hit a wall. So you really have to, it's really the soundness that you have to relax. But that's a great question. Great, great question. Wow, you guys are good. Exactly. I can't keep the soundness by relaxing completeness in a meaningful way. Yeah.
Hi, great talk. You mentioned a couple of negative results, and while answering, you mentioned one more.
Yeah.
How are these negative results shown? I mean, and I assume they are
Good.
unconditional.
Okay, yeah. No. Okay, great question. So, for example, the negative result for SNARG is actually a conditional negative result. Because, okay, so we don't really have negative results. So let me explain this better. The negative results often say, like for example, for SNARG, what we show, if you can construct such a little proof for any computation, then it will really violate our beliefs about complexity. We don't believe in complexity, that any, let's say, time t computation is also in n time. So if you can do a succinct proof, it's like a non-deterministic time much less than t. We don't believe that that's true in complexity theory. Now, we don't know how to prove any low bounds in complexity theory either. For all we know, p is equal to np. We don't know. But we don't believe that is true. And therefore, we don't believe that kind of statistically secure or sound SNARGs exist. So that's a very, very good point. When I say it's impossible, I mean we believe it's impossible.
I mean, that's true for zero knowledge proofs don't exist also?
So, okay, zero knowledge proofs don't exist is a bit more complex because it depends on your definition of zero knowledge. So, if you want to define it, okay, they gave a definition that is very beautiful and general. Under their definition, it just doesn't exist. It's not. It's unconditionally just does not exist. But you can possibly define zero knowledge. For example, let me give you another definition. It's not zero knowledge. It's what we call witness indistinguishable. It just says, I'm going to take your proof. I'm going to convert it to another proof. The new proof, I'm not saying it's, okay, here's my zero knowledge guarantee. If you started with proof A or started with proof B and you made it zero knowledge, it's not really zero knowledge, then the new proof looks the same whether you started with A or you started with B. So it's the most zero knowledge you can hope for, in other words. It's like the best possible zero knowledge. And then we know how to do non-interactively. So, you know, it depends on your definition. Their definition is using a simulator. It's a very robust and easy to use definition that works in a composable setting. Their definition you cannot do with one message. But it depends on the definition you want.
And the unconditional ones are proved using some sort of a diagonalization kind of an argument? Or?
So, okay, the witness in this, okay, if you want, okay, you can do non-interactive, but it's witness indistinguishable proof, and that you can do it under cryptographic assumptions. For the negative result of Shafi, Silvio, and for the actual zero knowledge one, it's not actually diagonalization. It's, you know, if I gave you the definition, it kind of, you can see that it's impossible to achieve. It doesn't require actually diagonalization. Yeah, I didn't give you the definition, so I can't really answer the question. But no, it's not based on diagonalization techniques. But thank you, guys. Thank you for the great questions.
ACM India, I'm delighted to do this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the wonderful talk.
Thank you so much, Jane. This is amazing. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Really, I am delighted and honored. Thank you.